Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are going to completely transform the way you speak. We're unpacking nearly 50 everyday phrasal verbs, drawing from a fascinating real-life conversation between two speakers, Emily and Paul. This is all about helping you step away from that stiff textbook English and start sounding perfectly natural. I am so excited to guide you through this, so let's dive right in and lock these phrases into your memory. All right, let's look at our roadmap. We'll start with exactly why these verbs matter, and then we'll literally just follow a chronological day. We're going from starting the morning, right through the commute, into evenings and weekends, and finally, making future plans. This flow creates a sort of mental scaffolding to help you remember these verbs in context. And at the end, we'll cover the exact steps to make them stick for good. Section 1. Why phrasal verbs matter. Honestly, so many learners find these difficult, but they are the absolute secret to ditching that stiff vocabulary. Now, what's really interesting here is that avoiding that textbook stiffness requires fully embracing these daily phrases. When Emily and Paul converse, they aren't using overly formal, rigid words. They rely on these 2 to 3 word combinations constantly. It's the language of friends, family, and authentic connection. It's how real people actually talk. Section 2. Starting the day. Let's trace how Emily and Paul kick off their morning, right from the very second they open their eyes. Think about how the early morning flows. At 6 a.m., Emily's alarm goes off. You know that awful noise? It prompts her to wake up, meaning she just opens her eyes. But then time passes, right? It isn't until 6:30 a.m. that she finally braves the cold and gets up. And right after that, they both turn on their morning devices, whether that's the life-saving coffee machine or the radio. Notice the crucial contrast here. Our speakers note a massive difference between just waking up and actually getting up out of bed. Emily mentions she often wakes up, but stays in bed for 10 more minutes because, well, she's exhausted. We've all been there. It's a subtle distinction, but mastering it adds instant fluency to your morning storytelling. Before officially starting the workday, there's usually some exercise involved. Emily talks about putting on her workout clothes so she can work out, literally exercising right in her living room. But just as importantly, she talks about taking off those sweaty clothes before she jumps in the shower. Putting on and taking off are direct opposites, which makes them incredibly easy to pair together in your mind. Section 3. Commute and work. Leaving the house introduces a whole new set of physical and mental actions. Let's get into it. On the commute, Paul shares a pretty miserable story. He talks about running after a bus in the pouring rain, finally getting on the crowded bus, sitting down to read, and sometimes getting off a stop early just to walk. Meanwhile, Emily details her office desk routine. The second she arrives, she logs into her computer, looks through her urgent emails, and writes down her tasks so she doesn't forget them. 2 totally different environments, 2 perfectly functional sets of vocabulary. Once you are at work, problem-solving vocabulary becomes absolutely essential, and it all starts with this highly useful foundational verb, figure out. To figure something out simply means to solve a problem or discover the answer to something entirely on your own. Emily applies this perfectly in a real workplace scenario. She says, "I try to figure it out myself before asking my boss for help." This single phrase beautifully demonstrates initiative and independence to her colleagues. It's definitely a phrase you can immediately drop into your own professional conversations to sound like a total pro. Emily also describes this incredibly stressful customer service scenario, and she literally strings together 5 distinct verbs to explain the whole thing. So she's got an angry customer. First, she has to deal with him. She stays totally calm, tells him she'll look into the problem, and promises to call him back later. Ultimately, she manages to sort out the issue completely. And how did it end? Well, it turned out great because the customer was happy. If you ever need to explain how you save the day at work, this is your absolute cheat sheet. Section 4. Evenings and weekends. As the workday ends, the physical setting completely shifts, and so does our vocabulary. We're moving from professional problem-solving back to personal relaxation. I want you to ask yourself this right now. What do you do when you get back home? Try to connect your own evening routine to Paul's habits. Paul mentions that the very first thing he does is take off his shoes, put on comfortable slippers, and hang up his coat right away. Visualizing your own hallway or closet while you practice these words creates a really powerful memory link. Next comes dinner, and here we contrast some very relatable choices. On one hand, you've got the easy choices, heating up leftovers from the day before or ordering in a pizza. But Paul admits he needs to balance this with healthier goals. He mentions wanting to cut down on fast food and eat out less often so he can actually cook fresh meals. Now, this captures the true essence of evening socialization. Emily talks about looking up recipes online so she can invite over friends to catch up over a good meal because they haven't hung out in a long time. Then Paul adds a great story. He mentions running into their friend Sarah at the supermarket, meeting her completely by chance, and he discovered she just started up her own small jewelry business. Notice how naturally and energetically these phrases chain together to tell a really compelling story? Section 5. Making future plans. Looking ahead to the weekend or future holidays requires a totally different set of conversational phrasal verbs, usually involving travel, prep, and money. Paul vividly recalls this freezing mountain trip from last year where he had to wrap up in 3 layers of clothes. They completely panicked when their car almost broke down in the middle of nowhere. Luckily, the engine started up again, and they finally pulled up to their beautiful cabin just before dark. They loved having the chance to get away for a few days. You can practically feel the cold and the relief just by following these 5 verbs. Planning for future trips also means managing your money. Here, Emily and Paul discuss prioritizing saving up cash for a summer holiday, which means putting away a little bit of money every single month. Paul realizes he needs to stop blowing his money on small things like video games, and Emily suggests he just give up the games for a while. Again, we see this brilliant contrast between positive, future-focused actions and negative habits. Finally, we have reached Section 6, How to Remember Them. We've covered a massive amount of daily vocabulary, so how do we actually make these verbs stick so you aren't just staring blankly when it's your turn to speak? The source material lays out the simple, highly actionable 3-step strategy to lock these into your brain starting right now. Step 1. Listen in context. Ditch the isolated lists and tune into real conversations, like Emily and Paul's. Step 2. Write down every phrasal verb you hear. The physical act of writing actually aids retention. And step 3, use it in a sentence today. Seriously, do not wait for tomorrow.
So let's wrap up this explainer with a challenge. Don't just passively consume this information. Which phrasal verb will you follow through with, meaning to complete an action you promised to do, and use today before you head out the door? Look around your room right now. Are you about to turn on a light, put on a jacket, maybe heat up some food? Pick just one verb right now, use it in a sentence out loud, and take that first step towards sounding incredibly natural. Because the true secret to mastering English isn't found in a dusty dictionary. It's hidden in the small, simple phrases we use every single day. So what's your verb going to be? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep listening closely.